Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody's having a great start to your day. We're going to get started in less than 1 minute. Y'all see what the topic is here today. We're going to talk about the difference between good players and difference makers. There is a difference. I'm going to articulate that difference. I'm going to explain why there's a difference, and I'm going to help you self-assess which one you are, or if you are either. Maybe you're not even good. But we're going to figure all that out here today. We're going to start in about 30 seconds. Give everybody a chance to get in, get comfortable, put your headphones in, turn your volume up, remove distractions so you can pay complete attention to the game that's about to be given to you here. What we are talking about, as I said, good players versus difference makers. And again, you're going to understand that these players, these levels of players do exist. Now, y'all heard the phrase, there's levels to this. All right, so you're going to understand what these levels are. And I'm not even going to talk about the lowest level people. So people who are just complete bums and they bring nothing to the table, we're not going to discuss them today. They're not worth our time. If you happen to be one of them, then I would suggest you work on your game so you are no longer bringing your teams down and you're no longer a burden on the organization. Get yourself some skills or play a different game in which you are actually good. But you can't be bringing the team's level down. You bring the team's level down, you won't have to worry about whether you are doing that or not for too long, because if you are not helping the team get better, then eventually the team will get rid of you. All right, that's usually what happens in life. Anything that's not adding to the situation, eventually you get removed. So don't even worry about it. If you think you might be making that mistake, you will find out soon enough that you are, because it's going to be obvious. But what we are going to talk about are, again, the other levels, which is the good players and the difference makers. And again, understanding the difference and how maybe you can start to become one or start performing and carrying yourself as if you are one. So then you can actually grow into being that individual. And a lot of this is about your mindset more than it's about your skill set. So before we get started, let me introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dre Baldwin. Many know me as Dre all day. I'm a former 9-year pro athlete, author of 35 books, done 4 TEDx talks. I created this brand that is called Work on Your Game. Our jobs here is to help you perform at your highest level, do so consistently, and produce more results. We are in the performance and results business. So any of you who is focused on performing at your best and producing results and doing it consistently, this is the place for you. Just go over to workonyourgameuniversity.com. That link is in my bio, wherever you are consuming this right now. And that's where you can get started working with us. What I'm giving you here is a teaser, basically a test drive to help you understand the kind of game that you get inside the university when you're working with me directly as your coach. So again, the topic again today is good player versus difference maker. I got 3 points I'm going to share here. Let's get right to it. Number one, what is a good player? What's going on, Andy, over there on IG? And by the way, I'll take questions and comments at the end if anybody has any. What is a good player? A good player is a person who shows up and does their job. And this, you can apply this in any organization. So this can be in a family. This can be a sports team. This can be a business team. This can be a group of people just working together to achieve a goal, whether even an informal group. A good player is just someone who shows up and does their job. They do what is asked of them. They contribute. And they are an asset to the group. This is a solid person. I was thinking about this topic here today because right now, when I'm recording this is early fall and NBA training camps are happening. And you're seeing these new players playing for new teams and same players playing for the teams they were already on. And everybody's all excited and optimistic about how successful they think that they might be on in this upcoming season. And not everybody's going to be successful. The good thing about sports, at least what I like about it, is that there's a binary and there are winners and losers. It is not a finite game, meaning for somebody to win, somebody has to lose. That's the way it works in the sports world, not the way it works in the world that many of you operate in on a daily basis. But the thing I like about sports is that it's black and white, winner, loser. So in the sports world, every team is sounding optimistic and excited about how their season is going to go. But we know not everybody's season is going to go good because not every team can win. But the team that does great, they got to be a terrible team. That's just the way that it works. So anyway, what a good player is a person who is an asset to a team, an asset to the group. They do bring something to the table. And here's how you can tell if you have a good player. You put a good player on a good team, that team will continue to be good. The good player is not going to make your team worse. they're going to basically maintain the status quo. So any of you want to know if you are a good player, just ask yourself, any group that you're a part of right now, is that group doing the same now that it was doing before you got there? Is it doing pretty much the same as it was doing before? Then you are a good player. This is not a knock on you. I'm just pointing out what makes a good player. A good player usually is a person who is pretty good at maintaining, not disturbing, the status quo. They join in, they find a way to integrate within the group. They don't make the group worse, and they are able to pretty much maintain what is already happening. Another thing about good players is that they are generally interchangeable. Good players are generally interchangeable, meaning if you take one good player you have on your team and you replace them with someone else who's a good player, the situation is not going to be disturbed much. You're pretty much going to get the same results that you were getting before, regardless of who's in that spot. Good players are generally interchangeable. So that means if you lose one, you can go get another one. Got a pause connection on Instagram. The thing about good players is that if one of them leaves, you can replace them with someone else of equal or greater value, and you're pretty much going to get the same result that you were getting before. Here's the challenge with good players. So I told you all the generally positive. You may consider some of those neutral things about good players. And by the way, I'll take questions and answer comments at the end. Good players are, as I said, they're interchangeable, but also good players don't have the ability to make something out of nothing. Good players are not this. So a good player is a person, if you put them on a team that is already good, the team will remain good. You put a good player on a team that is trash. You put a good player on a team that's trash, terrible, and is going nowhere. That team will continue to be trash, terrible, and going nowhere. See, that's the thing about a good player. They maintain the status quo. Status quo doesn't have to be positive. If the status quo is the team's garbage, you put a good player on a garbage team, that team's still going to be garbage. They can't change the situation. They can maintain a situation. They don't change it. And that's a big difference that I want you all to understand as I move on to my points. You put a good player on an amazing team, a team that's already doing great, that team will continue to do great. Because, again, good players maintain what's already happening. Does everybody follow this? So you can't put a good player on your team and expect them to change the situation because they are not capable. They're not that level of player. All right, they can do what they can do. So put a good player on a garbage team, the team will still be garbage. Put a good player on a mediocre team, they'll still be mediocre. Put a good player on a good team, that team will still be good. Put a good player on a great team, they'll still be great. Good players are good by themselves. However, they don't have the ability to change the trajectory of any situation that they join. Their ability stops at being able to maintain the situation that they are in. All right, that's what a good player can do. They can maintain the situation that is already happening, but they cannot change the situation that is happening. So what we're talking about here again today, before I move on to the second, hold on a second. All right, TikTok is changing stuff around and move things around. So what we're talking about here today is good players versus difference makers. So I just told you what a good player is. Now let me tell you what a difference maker is. All right, this is a different level of player. Difference maker is a person who not only does their thing personally and does what the group needs them to do. A difference maker also has the ability to change the trajectory of a group's potential, where they're going, the direction that they're headed, and they can just make wholesale differences in what's happening within any group that they join. All right, this is why a difference maker is called a difference maker. They're a different level than a good player. They change the entire trajectory. So if you take a trash organization and you add a difference maker to the organization, what's going to happen is that trash group is going to start to be actually mediocre or good. They're going to start to trend upward. You put a difference maker on a team that is good, they will turn the team great. You put a difference maker on a team that's already great, they'll turn that team into like spectacular, amazing. They're going to be doing things that nobody even thought that the team was capable of doing. And that's why they're called a difference maker, because they make a huge difference in what's happening in any organization, and it's usually a positive difference. Difference maker changes the situation. They change the mathematics and there's a word I'm looking for that is escaping me right now. I'll get back to it in a second. But they basically change the dynamics. They change the math of the circumstances because they walked into the room. Difference maker is the type of person when everybody else in the room has already tried to fix a problem and no one has been able to fix the problem. The difference maker comes in and they can solve the issue that nobody else has been able to solve. That's a difference maker. Difference maker is basically the case of emergency button. all you know that is has those. If you go in any building in America, there's a there's a fire alarm, and you probably don't even notice them because they're everywhere. Most of the time we're not paying attention. But if there was an emergency and you really needed the emergency authorities to show up, if you pulled that lever, then they'll be there within the next 5, 10, 15 minutes. Why? Because that's what a difference maker is. All right, you can't solve it. You tried as hard as you could to solve the issue. You haven't been able to solve it. You call it a difference maker. All of a sudden, things get solved. That's what a difference maker does. You can see this it's usually very obvious in sports. You can tell who the difference makers are. They are usually called superstars. All right, those are people usually the superstars. And then when you have a superstar on your team in sports, let's use a sport like basketball where it's easily translatable. A superstar on the team means you're probably going to at least make the playoffs. You might not go far, but you'll at least make the playoffs when you have a superstar on your roster. Now, when you have good players on your roster, you can still miss the playoffs, even though that player is good. It's not that everybody on the team is bad if you miss the playoffs, but a good player, as I already told you, they maintain the status quo. If you want to change the situation, you want to alter the dynamics of a situation, you need difference makers on your team, not just good players. This is why it's very important when you're picking the people that you're going to have on your teams. You look for the mentality of the person, not just the skill set of the person. And those of you who are not in the position to pick teams and put people on your teams, you need to be looking at yourself then. Take everything I'm saying here and hold yourself to these things that I'm talking about. Are you a good player or are you a difference maker? Or do you change the trajectory? Do you change the dynamics? Do you change the mathematical possibilities of the group that you're a part of simply because you're part of the group? And the reason why this is because difference makers don't only just do their personal job, what they're supposed to do, they also change the energy of the entire room as soon as they walk into the room. And this is the big part about the difference makers. Not so much that the difference maker is just better than everybody else. Usually they are pretty good at what they do, but their skill level relative to a good player is usually not that much different. All right. A good player and a difference maker usually are pretty close in skill set. The difference is the mindset of the difference maker. The good player shows up and says, I'm going to do the job that I'm supposed to do. The difference maker comes in and says, I'm not only going to do my job, I want to make sure everybody else does their job. And I'm going to make sure that the group does well as a whole. And I'm taking personal responsibility for that. The difference maker simply takes on more responsibility than the good player does. And just by that shift in mentality, that psychological shift, the difference maker goes, again, from being a good player to a difference maker simply because they've decided that they're going to be the difference maker. And again, this is a mentality. This is a responsibility. This is about personal ownership, and it's about self-accountability. They're basically taking on more responsibility than quote unquote necessary. And because they take on that more responsibility, they magically, it seems, it's not really magic, but it seems as if they now have more capability. And this is the thing that I want to make sure all of you catch, that power and responsibility come as a package deal. If you want more power and you want more influence in anything that you do in life, all you have to do is take on more responsibility. Now, I made that sound simple, but when you think about what that really means, you'll understand why most people don't do it. Why most people don't have more power than what they have is simply because they are unwilling to accept the trade-off of this equation. The trade-off of taking on more power or having more power is that you must take on more responsibility, which means you are responsible for more things, for more people. When a situation doesn't go right, it's on you, even if you're not the reason that it didn't go right. It's like, again, thinking about basketball. If you're a superstar player on your team and you had a great game as usual, but nobody else in your team showed up and played well, the team loses, well, that's going to be on you because you're the superstar. You're supposed to be winning because the team's supposed to be winning because you're on it as a superstar. You can't let the team just keep losing because then you wouldn't be a superstar anymore. That team still has to find a way to win, even if nobody else on the team is showing up and doing their job. Then you got to do not only your job, you got to do the job of other people on the team. That's the responsibility that comes with power. That's the responsibility that comes with influence. That's the responsibility that comes with status. Any of you who follows, you don't even have to follow it, but you know Barack Obama, the guy who was president from 2000, he won the election in 2008, and then he was president for 2 terms. Do you see how much older he looked by the time he left office compared to how he looked when he first came into office? When he first came in, he looked really young, right? And then when he left, he looked old. His face looked all beat up. He had all this gray hair. What happened over the course of that 8 years? I'll tell you what happened. Now he had to deal with a whole lot of responsibility. That's a stressful job because every day you're waking up and there are millions of people out there who are depending on the decisions that you make for their well-being, for their next step, what they can and what they can't do, whether people agree with it or disagree with it. That person has a lot of power, a lot of responsibility, and that job is a lot of stress. And again, look at pictures of Obama when he won the election in 2008. Then look at pictures of him when he left the White House in 2017. So it was 2016 election. He left in early 2017. Look at the difference between them. It's because he dealt with a whole lot of stress for 8 years. Now, what I'm saying is I'm saying that to say this to all of you. As long as you're okay with dealing with that kind of stress, I'm not saying you're going to look old and have gray hair. Maybe you will. Maybe some of you already do. But the point is the stress that Barack Obama dealt with during that 8 years, that's the kind of stress you got to deal with when you take on a leadership position and when you decide to become a difference maker. Another key thing about this point of a difference maker is that it is more of a decision than it is an ability. So it's not like some people have the ability to be difference makers and others don't. It's not a skill thing. Decision maker is a mindset thing, which means, good news, any of you can be one if you want to. And you can be a difference maker if you want to, but you just got to be willing, and you just had to be willing to take on the responsibility that comes with being one. So let me see what this is. All right, so they got this live goal on TikTok. I don't know what this meant, so I just pushed it. Let's see what happens. Anyway, you want to be a difference maker, folks. All you got to do is decide. It doesn't matter how much skill you have. Doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter your background or your resume. All you have to do is be willing to take on the responsibility. Yo, man, Reed, thank you. Thank you for the whatever it is you did there. Got me the goal. I think I reached the goal on TikTok. All right, so I don't even know what I did, but that worked. All right, appreciate it for the gift there over there on TikTok. So, difference maker. All right, they represent, when a difference maker walks in the room, again, they change the energy of the room. I'll give you an example. Take someone like Michael Jordan. I think we all can agree he was a difference maker for his team. He had skill. Obviously, he was good, obviously, but also he was a person who he changed the possibilities. He changed the mathematics of a team when he joined the team. So those of you who follow basketball, or even if you don't, you know that he won 3 championships in a row in the early 90s, then he retired, then he came back. And when he came back, that team all of a sudden was thinking, hey, maybe we can win the championship because we got this guy. All right, just because he showed up, now we think we can win the championship. They didn't win it when he came back in that little bit of a season that he played, but then the next 3 seasons, they won 3 championships in a row. And I think we can all agree he was the reason they did it, right? Because he's a difference maker. And there was a guy he played with in those last 3 championship years named Dennis Rodman. Most of you know who Dennis Rodman is. And one of the things that Dennis Rodman says is very telling about Michael Jordan. It perfectly illustrates this point. He said, you have no idea the amount of pressure that is lifted off your shoulders when you're on the same team as Michael Jordan. And then he said, every time we played a game, we felt like we had a chance to win every single night just because Michael Jordan was on our team. And Dennis Rodman's a Hall of Fame player. Dennis Rodman wasn't a bum. He was a very good player. But notice what I said. Dennis Rodman was a good player. He was not a difference maker. He was a good player. Michael Jordan was a difference maker. And Dennis Rodman himself, the good player himself, said, the reason why I knew, or I felt we had a chance to win every single game we played is because Michael Jordan was on the team. That's the difference maker. That's what people say about a difference maker. So again, I'm going to bring it back to you, listener. What do people say about you? And actually, let me ask you a better question. Forget what other people say about you. What do you say about you? That's a better question. Because you don't know what other people say about you. Usually they don't say these things in front of your face. What Dennis Rodman said about Michael Jordan, he didn't say it to Michael Jordan. He said it to a reporter. Let me ask you, what do you say about you? What role do you want to play? That's a really good question. What position do you want? Do you want to be a good player, or do you want to be a difference maker? I think most of you want to be one or the other. I don't think any of you wants to be a bum. I don't think any of you wants to be on a team where you're a bum. Do you want to be a good player, or do you want to be a difference maker? And understand the trade-offs that come with being a difference maker. First of all, let me tell you the good parts. When you're a difference maker, you get all the accolades. If it's a team sport, let's say like basketball, you probably get the biggest contract. You get a bunch of endorsements. You got a bunch of fans. You got people wearing your jerseys and wanting your autograph and want to take pictures with you. And you get a bunch of followers on social media. You get all of those things when you're a difference maker. But also the the trade-offs, the things that come with it that you do not have an option of declining, but you must take on, is that when things are going wrong and nobody knows what to do, including you, everybody's looking at you to figure out what to do, even though you don't know what to do either. All right? But usually a difference maker figures out what to do. Why? Because that's your job. If you don't want to do this, you don't want to be the person that everyone's looking at when no one knows what to do, you can't be a difference maker. You have to take this on. Again, these are not optional. When you're a difference maker, when nothing's working, everybody's going to be looking at you like, hey, what we going to do? And you don't even know, but you can't say you don't know, because as soon as you say you don't know, well, you're not a difference maker anymore. You lose your position. Everyone is dependent on you, that when their abilities end and they've done as much as they can, they expect you to pick up the slack and do what they didn't do to make sure that the team still wins. So again, let's use Michael Jordan as an example. He's a pretty good example that in games, if you are a basketball fan, then you probably know about this. There'd be games the Bulls would be playing, and the players on the team are doing what they do. And it's late in the game, and let's say it's tied, and the Bulls might win the game, they might lose the game. Everyone's looking at Michael Jordan. All right, it's the fourth quarter, there's 5 minutes left in the game. It's a close game. This other team's pretty good. How are we going to win this game? Well, get a ball to that guy. Let's see if he can figure it out. And he had to figure it out. And more often than not, he figured it out. All right, that's why he's a difference maker, because he figured it out, even though it wasn't 100% clear exactly what could be done or what needed to be done. Again, his teammates are not bums. They're good players, but there's a difference in mentality. All right, is everybody catching that? Mentality. When they walk in the room, the energy changes. Just like Dennis Rodman said, I knew we had a chance to win every game because he was on the team. Not because Michael Jordan could jump high, not because he had a good jump shot, just because he was on the team. That's a mentality. It's an energy, folks. It's not a skill set. And the good thing about it, got a pause connection on Instagram. All right, there we go. Good thing about it being a mentality and not a skill set, everybody, is that any of you can adopt this mindset literally like right now. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to lift any weights. You don't have to go buy a new car. You don't have to make more money. You can adopt this mindset right now if you choose. Okay. What the difference maker does is represent new possibilities for everyone involved. When you're around a difference maker, you feel like there are possibilities available to you that weren't available yesterday, just because they're there. And again, ask yourself if you invoke this type of energy in other people. Do you invoke this energy in people you're around? And another thing about difference makers, I'll remind you, there are not too many of them. Okay, so don't go around throwing this title at people when they haven't earned it. All right, there are not that many difference makers out there. All right, many people are good players, but they're not difference makers. They are few and far between. But when you come across one, you'll know. Just don't misdiagnose. Point number 3, last point. We're talking here today, good players versus difference makers. I'll take questions at the end if there are any. Number 3, if you want to be a difference maker, then the game is no longer just about you. As soon as you decide to join the ranks of the difference makers is no longer just about you. It is about not only you, but everyone in the organization of which you are a part. Whether that organization is your family at home and it's 5 people, or is your sports team and it's 15 people, or is your business and it's 100 people. As soon as you decide to become a difference maker, you can no longer only focus on yourself. Now you got to focus on the group. You got to do what you got to do, of course, but you're doing what you do in the framework of how does this help the group become successful? So someone like, let's say, we'll use Michael Jordan since I brought him up. He's a good example of this, and he's visible enough that all of you know who he is. That when the season started, their coach, Phil Jackson, would go around the locker room and ask everybody, what are your goals for the season? And players would say what they wanted to do. I want to win a championship. I want to score this many points. I want to make the All-Star game, play this many minutes, etc. We got around to Michael once, and he said, I don't have any individual goals. My only goal is to win a championship, and everybody in his locker room is going to follow my lead. See, that's the mindset of a difference maker. They're not thinking about themselves personally. They're thinking about how does the group succeed, and they get their success off the back of being on a successful group because they're the star already. So if the group wins, everybody's going to look at them anyway. So they don't have to worry about themselves. So he didn't have to say, I want to make the All-Star game, or I want to win MVP, or I want to average 30 points, because he understood that he was going to do all that stuff anyway. The point is, let's win the championship, and I'm going to get all of that stuff as a part of the package deal of the team being successful. His mindset was not, again, all the players on the team, his teammates, when they went around the room, they all started talking about what they personally wanted to do. They were talking about their personal goals. He didn't say anything about his personal goals. He said, I don't have any personal goals. My only goal is we're going to win the championship. The team is his goal. And when you're a difference maker, the team is your responsibility, no longer you. It's no longer about what you want. It's not about how much sleep you got last night, or how good you feel, or what kind of meal you got to eat. Again, you're going to get all those things, but the bigger picture is you're going after this thing up here, and in the process of getting this up here, all the stuff down here you automatically get. It's just part of the package deal when you're the difference maker, because everything's on you. Now, when you run a business, for example, you don't have to say you got to run a business, you got 15 employees. You don't have to say my goal is I want to make this much money to take home this year. I'm not saying I'm not saying not to have that goal. If that's part of your process. But if you say, I want to make sure that our business doubles our revenue from last year to this year, and you already know what your profit margin is, and you know how much money you took home last year, then the goal of making more money this year is automatically going to happen if the business doubles its revenue. And if the business doubles its revenue, well, guess what? All your employees feel good. Everybody gets bonuses. You can add more staff, and everybody's happy because everybody's making more money. So you see, all the personal goals fall underneath the umbrella of the group goal when you are a difference maker. So you don't even have to think about yourself as much. Again, I'm not saying you don't think about yourself at all, but when you think about the group winning, you're automatically taking care of yourself when you're a difference maker, because everything that happens with the group is on you anyway. Now, when you're a good player, you can just think about yourself. Again, think about an employee versus a business owner. And if you who's an employee working at a company, well, your goal might be, I want to hit these sales numbers. I want to make this much money. I need, you might be looking at other jobs right now because they're not paying you enough, or maybe you don't like the company. Maybe you don't like your boss. You don't like your coworkers. You can just think about yourself because you're a good player on a team. I'm assuming all of you are good players at what you do. But when you own a business, you can't just think about you. You got to think about the people who work for you. You got to think about your customers. You got to think about your clients. You got to think about the market. You got to think about everything because it's all on you. And if the business does well, guess what? You get the biggest piece of chicken. If the business fails, everything's on you as well. See, this is a responsibility that a lot of people simply don't want to take on. Again, so think about Barack Obama. Again, remember, look what he looked like when he came into office. Look what he looked like when he left. All right, are you willing to deal with that? I'm going to take questions at the end, by the way. I'm on the end of my third point, and I'll take questions at the end after I recap this. So when you are the difference maker, it's no longer just about you, okay? It's because good players can get away with that. When you're a good player, you can show up, do your job, and go home. You can clock in at 9 o'clock, you can clock out at 5 o'clock, and you can leave work at work, and you can go home and not think about work again. I got to pause connection on IG. All right, there we go. You can go home and not think about work again until you clock in at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. When you're a good player, you have that luxury. You can have, as they say, work-life balance. When you're a difference maker, there is no work-life balance. There ain't none. Why? Because everything's on you. So if something happens at 10 o'clock or it's still on your mind at 10 o'clock, you can't just turn that off. You got to deal with that. You got to handle it. Why? Because it's on you. If everything fails, then everything fails. And all the good players, they don't have a job anyway. Their job will be gone. If your business fails, all your employees lose their jobs. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to go get another job. Now, if your business fails, though, you can't just go get another job. Now you got to pick up the pieces. Everybody get what I'm saying here? This is the responsibility that goes on the shoulders of the difference maker. And some people may listen to this and say, well, Dre, that sounds like a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. You're right. Let me address that. That's exactly what it is. That's me addressing it. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of pressure and a lot of stress, right? Well, it is. It is pressure and it is stressful. Again, look at Barack Obama. Was he stressed? Did he go through a lot of stress in that 8 years? He aged like 20 years in 8 years. Why is that? Because he was dealing with a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. But at the same time, all you know is his name. Everybody knows his name. All right, he probably is making a lot of money. He probably making more money now after being president than he was making while being president. Actually, not probably. I guarantee you he's making more money now than he was making being president. Salary of a president is not that big. Salary of a president is like $400,000. He's making more than that now. Not guaranteed. Why? Because he played the role of being the person at the highest job and dealing with all that pressure and all that stress. And he did it. I mean, he didn't die. So I guess we'll call it successful, regardless of what you think about his administrative policies. We can say it's successful. He lived, and now he gets to deal with the benefits of having been in that position. And that's the same thing again. Look at Michael Jordan. All right, he's still making a whole lot of money. He ain't played in 20 years. Why? Because he gets to reap the benefits of having been in the position that he was in. So there are good things. There are challenges to this. It's just a choice of, do you want to accept this role? Do you want to accept this job? Okay, it's no longer just about you. You got to look at the bigger picture. You got to see the entire chessboard. And again, you can't be selfish anymore. Or if you're going to be selfish, you're being selfish in that I'm being selfish about what's going to help the group. It is no longer just about selfish for you as an individual person. Okay, so there's a lot more responsibility, not for everyone. It's no longer a 9 to 5. It's not a clock in at 9, clock out at 5, forget about work till tomorrow at 9. Nope. Difference maker don't have that. They don't have that luxury. Okay. You don't have a timesheet when you're a difference maker. There's no clocking in and clocking out when you own the business. Any of you own a business, you don't clock in and clock out. It's just 24 hours a day. All right. As long as you want to run that business. All right. So this is something that I will do. I may do another live maybe tomorrow, and I'll talk a little bit more about what makes the mindset of a difference maker. So if any of you would be interested in that, you can let me know. I might do a whole other one just talking about the mindset alone, because the mindset piece is really the difference between the good player and the difference maker. But let me take questions and comments. If you have one, put it in the comment section on whatever platform you're watching me right now. I'm on, I think we're live in 7 different places right now. So whichever one you're on, put your comment. I'll address it in a second. Let me just recap my points. Good player versus difference maker. 3 things. Number 1, good player does their job. They contribute. They're an asset to the group, but they do not change the trajectory of the group. In other words, they don't change the situation. They continue the situation. Good players maintain the status quo. So you put a good player on a bad team, they'll still be bad. Put them on a good team, they'll still be good. Put them on a great team, team will still be great. Good players don't rock the boat. They basically whatever you got going on, add a good player to that group, and you're going to have the same thing going on. Number 2, though, difference makers, not only do they can maintain the status quo, but they actually change the situation and they put you on an upward trajectory. So you put a difference maker on a team, they can make a bad team good, they can make a good team great, and they make a great team historic. Why? Because a difference maker changes the dynamics of the situation. They change the dynamics. They represent a new possibility for everyone involved, and they do things not only to help themselves, they help everybody in the group just because they're part of it. Again, Dennis Rodman said, every night you play with Michael Jordan, you feel like you had a chance to win. That's a difference maker. If you a good player, you're going to say, well, they're going to get their stats. Like we're talking about basketball. Good players going to get their 25 points every game, but the team might still be trash, even though they got 25 points. So how you getting 25 points every game? The team's still trash because they're not a difference maker. They're a good player. Difference maker, they're going to get their 25 points and the team's going to win more often just because the difference maker's on the team. And again, difference maker is a mentality. It is not a skill set. And number 3, if you want to be a difference maker, understand the game is bigger than you now. It's not just about you anymore. It is bigger than you. You cannot just focus on yourself. There is no 9 to 5. You don't clock in and clock out. It is 24 hours a day. And these are the responsibilities that come with being a difference maker that come with power. If you want to be powerful and you want to be influential in life, folks, you must take on responsibility, which come with the possibility of stress, anxiety, and pressure. And if you don't want to deal with stress, anxiety, and pressure, then you are unqualified for leadership. Bottom line. If you do not want to deal with stress, anxiety, and pressure, you are unqualified to be a leader in anything, in a family, in a business, on a sports team, or anywhere else, in a volunteer organization, at a church, doesn't matter. If you don't want to deal with those things, you can't lead. Leaders have to be willing to deal with those. Why? Because the people in your organization don't want to deal with them. So there are going to be stressful times. There are going to be pressures. There's going to be anxieties. Somebody has to deal with it. Guess who's responsible for that? The person at the top. So who's the person at the top? If you want to be that person, when everybody else has tried everything they can and they still haven't solved the problem, you got to solve the problem. And yes, is that pressure? Yes. Is that stressful? Yes. Do you want to deal with it? I can't answer that question. Only you can answer that. But I'm just telling you what it is so you can make a choice. But understand that there's a choice no matter what you do. And if you make no choice, then choice will be made for you. So I suggest you make your own choice. So let me see what we got comments wise over on LinkedIn. Priscilla Marola, PhD. Good morning. She said, excellent mindset. The pros and cons of being a difference maker. I always view it as an honor to be a catalyst for change. However, it comes with responsibility and sometimes criticism. It's important to be a team player and have a vision for the team. Yes, criticism. That's another one that comes with being a difference maker. Priscilla, you're absolutely right. Is that the criticism can come with it when the team's not winning. Even when the team is winning, you might get criticized as a difference maker, and you can't complain about it. That's the thing about being a difference maker is everything gets put on. Everything gets thrown on your lap. Everything's on your shoulders. Even the stuff that's not your fault is your responsibility. So difference makers, again, it may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility. So if someone on your team messes up and drops the ball, you got to do their job for them if necessary, because again, your responsibility is the team, not just yourself personally. So Dynasty Sage says he comes on my FYP. I listen as always. You saying me? What you doing in my live then? If you don't like what I said, why you in here? He said he didn't like my stuff. All right. Well, you got to get out of here. And let's see. I'm going through TikTok, by the way, and I'm going to do Instagram in a second. Young man Reed, appreciate the gift as usual. Good to see you here again. Rich Game Wealth, good morning. Sherry Harvey said, difference maker, thank you for the definition. You're welcome. Glad you got that. Mr. X, good stuff. Rich Game said, how did you overcome the biggest challenge when you decided to be a difference maker? Well, the biggest challenge is ongoing. So you don't really overcome it. It's just something that you accept. So the thing is, and you will love the mindset piece. Yeah, I might do that one tomorrow. So the thing about being a difference maker is that you don't really overcome it. It's not like it's a problem and you solved it and it's over. It's ongoing. So as long as you're a difference maker, you got to deal with picking up the pieces. If people on your team don't do their job, or in your organization or group or whatever you're a part of, it's a mentality. So a mentality is not like a race where it starts and ends. It's ongoing. It's forever. So as long as you're in that position, you have to continually deal with the, if you want to call it, pressure or stress that comes with being in the position that you're in. And it's most definitely the mindset piece. All right, I'm gonna do the mindset piece probably tomorrow. Rich Game said, do you have a book on being a difference maker? Well, I talk about these principles I talk about in all my books. I would suggest the Mirror of Motivation, which is right here over my right ear, this black book right here. Mirrorofmotivation.com is where you can get that. Mirror of Motivation. Just take out the mirrorofmotivation.com. Book's free, just cover the shipping, is that book. But all of these topics that y'all hear me talking about in these streams, I will eventually write books on damn near all of them. So assuming, by God's grace, if I live long enough, I might get 100 books. I got 35 now. I think I can get 100. I got enough material for 100. I just gotta get them all written. But it's a possibility. It's an aspiration. We'll get there. Appreciate the lightning bolt. JC Butler, young man Reed as well. Thank you. Thank you for helping me hit the goal. Helping me hit the goal. I guess I got to raise the goal next time. Peace, Dre. Appreciate the wisdom. Whoever that is, you just got an asterisk for your name. So thank you for that person. Finish line never moves. That's right, but you really can't reach it either. That's the thing. It's like running it to the horizon. Right? You can never reach the horizon because it just it's there, but no matter how fast you run, you never actually get there. So you got to keep going. So that's the thing about being a difference maker, is that is an ongoing job that never ends. And again, a lot of people check out of that game and it's okay to check out when you want to be out. Right? Michael Jordan doesn't play anymore. Barack Obama is no longer president. So you can check out when you want to check out, but just understand when you check in, what you're signing up for. That's the part